first and foremost, kind of what we're seeing in the market. The appreciation is, article from Inman talking about kind of where they're projecting home prices to go. They're seeing them to slow a bit, but inventory is starting to creep up. I know the conversations I'm having with agents all across the country, that's what we're seeing, right? I know, I remember Kendall talking last year, it was the perfect storm of low demand and low supply, right? But now we're starting to see an uptick in inventory and buyers, having some more options. But what are you guys seeing as in conversation, but also kind of what they're touching on here in the Inman article?
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of markets that are getting a lot more inventory. So, depending on what markets you're in, you're feeling it, probably more so than the average. But certainly days on market going up, certainly inventory starting to climb. And obviously that has an impact on, the projection for house price appreciation this year, which I thought was pretty aggressive originally at, was it
3.4%, down from 5.8 last year. We started to see a little bit of course correction. Nothing double digit. I think it was in the nines was the biggest correction in price, and there was multiple markets throughout Florida, down in the coast areas, down into Texas as well, is where we saw a lot of the course correction. But I mean, do you think we'll start to see any double digit course correction on prices?
No, I don't think so. Not yet. Until you see, you start seeing 120-day average on, days on the market, you're not going to see things, come. You're not going to feel that pressure as a seller. If everything went from selling in 30 days to 60 days, that's still a seller's market. So it's still very evenly supplied, if not still a seller's market in almost all markets. So you're not in a buyer's market, and that has to hit for some time before you start to see prices come down. The thing is, if that does happen, the sellers have the equity to make those moves. So if inventory was high and your home hasn't sold in 90 to 120 days, you're going to lower the price because you can. And if you have to sell it, you're going to lower the price. It seems like it could be headed to that direction, but I don't know that we would see any kind of moving, negative appreciation in terms of, home prices this year. I don't think that's realistic. The pessimists, they have the graph that shows the pessimist versus the optimist. It's a broad spectrum of what people believe will happen, but it seems like just more or less flat or keeping up with appreciation is kind of the low expectation. And, the high expectation is, ridiculously high. So, it feels to me like, 3% to 3.5% is probably kind of what to expect. Yeah, for the next couple of years. And interest rates could play into that. Obviously, they get these rates down, which it doesn't look like Jerome Powell is going to listen to Trump. Feels like Trump would like to get them down some more. I think it would be helpful if he did, but doesn't look like he's going to pull the trigger on that. So probably a lot more to come of what we're currently seeing than anything. Yeah,
and I know every market is different, right? Being able to pay attention to, and obviously we have a strong following in Ohio, and having a lot of conversations the last couple of weeks. I mean, Al, you guys are still, inventory is still relatively low for you guys throughout most of the part, Cleveland and the suburbs.
Yeah, we're still getting multiple offers if it's priced right. And that's the big difference between, like, let's say 3 years ago, it actually didn't have to be, you could get away with overpricing it a little bit and still get multiple offers. You're not going to get away with overpricing it now but if you do price it competitively, we just had a house that was actually expired, and I'll give you some real numbers. It expired at $400,000 because that's what the seller thought it was worth. One of our agents jumped in, listed it, and convinced them that if they could just list it at $350,000, which is what the market's telling them that they should be at, they're probably going to get more than that. They ended up getting 6 offers, and their highest one was $401,000. How did it not sell at $401,000 when it was listed at $400,000? Well, that previous agent probably had it up at a higher price, eked it down. By the time they eked it down, it was probably showing 120 to 180 days on the market. And we know that, and I think Zillow is now starting to show these days on the market, or they have it for a while, whatever. But now I think sellers are seeing it. So, the way we're coaching our agents is, look, when you're talking to a seller, ask them, what do you think, like, number one red flag is if you were a shopper, you were a home buyer, and you see a house that's been on the market, what do you think the number one thing that they look at and they think, well, it's probably overpriced? It's not the price, because most people, by just looking at a house and a price, they're not able to just, determine, they're not an expert enough to look at it and say, oh, that's way overpriced. No, it's the days on the market. So if you're seeing the days on the market, it's the number one red flag saying, well, if it's 120 days on the market, then it must not be worth that price, right? So it must be less. So it's going to force the buyer to probably make a lower offer on that property. Yep. However, if you price it right, now the market, the true market, the ready, willing, and able buyers, the people who are serious buyers that are ready to, they're going to buy if it's close. They're all gonna jump on the boat at the same time, and you probably will still get the effect of an over list, sale possibly. So we're still seeing multiple offers. They are less and less. It's not 13 offers. It's 3 to 6, but there's still multiple offers, which is still a good sign that there's buyers out there that need a house. I think that inventory levels going up is not an entirely bad thing. Think about, someone made a really good point. I don't remember what I was listening to, but actually it was in the training we did. We're doing these AHA meetings. It's agents helping agents. That's what AHA stands for. And it's a lot of the agents that are stuck. And so you have some experienced agents coming in and sharing their wisdom and knowledge. And one of them had said, there's a lot of buyers out there, a lot of homeowners that had bought in 2020, 2021, 2022, that are just not happy with the house that they bought because they felt forced into the house that they really didn't want. It wasn't like the ideal house, but because things were flying off, they found themselves settling, lowering their standards for what they really wanted for their family, and just going into something that they could make work. So, I think that you're going to have a lot more happier homeowners because they do actually have more of that selection out there. But, hey, if there's 3%, 3.4% appreciation, that's an average. I think I read in the article, guys, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but San Francisco, which you could argue is not a normal market. It's just not normal, right? Like, it's not your average person. Average sale price there is well over $1 million. Maybe it's up to 2 now. And it's very unaffordable. And they have experienced a slight decline in price, but that's normal because it's already massively inflated already. And we're not seeing that in just kind of normal markets. I don't know if you're seeing it in Frisco, Jay. Frisco's been one of those markets, one of the hottest markets in the U.S. People flooding that market to move there, and they've been high prices there. So I don't know what you're hearing from teams down in Frisco, but we're still getting multiple offers in your more normal markets.